everybody. So let's go ahead and get started here. Today we're going to talk about the John Peplinski family. So we're going to take it up a couple of generations from John, and we're going to concentrate just on the Peplinski side, on the male grandfather side. And so in future episodes we can talk about the Coutulas, Kelpinskis, many of the others, as well as my mother's side, which I've done a lot of research on as well. But again, today we're going to concentrate on the Peplinskis, and probably for the next couple of episodes. So John, and then Joseph, and then his father it was Andreas Andrew Peter. And Andreas Andrew Peter was the first to emigrate from Poland, and so we'll spend an episode just on him. He's an interesting character for a lot of reasons, in the family. Extensions from there are very interesting, so that'll be a separate session all on itself. So today, again, we'll just concentrate on the few John, Joseph, and getting to Andre Peter. Okay, so John was born in 1903, and he was born in the Bay City, Colquhoun area, central Michigan, mid-Michigan, and he was the son of Joseph and Michelina, or Agnes was her American name, Coutua. So Joseph born in 1872 to 1939. And then Agnes was 1865 to 1951. And so John had married Sarah Kelpinski, or Salomia was her Polish name. And Sarah, born in 1903, she passed away of cancer in 1945, very young age. And my father at the time down here, Marion, only 11 years old, 10 maybe, so very young to be losing his mother. Very hard, I'm sure, in all the family. Children of John and Sarah were Leona in 1926 was the first, and then Stanley, John Jr., Marion, Nick, Sophie, and Pauline. And John was also married 2 more times after his first spouse passed away in 1945. He married Marie Roloff in 1946, and then they divorced in 1947. And then Ann Bennett, or McDonald was her maiden name. And if we just scroll down here, we'll see that they were married in 1952. Okay. I should mention a little bit how Ancestry, where I did all this research, is how it's structured. Over here you see facts, just different life events that happened with John. And then over here you see the sources that confirm all these facts, right? So they're linked in together, and they'll show you. So in this example, the 1920 United States Census records confirms that he was born in 1903, and that where he was residing in 1920. So if we want to open that up, he was 17 years old, so that might be an interesting point of view just to get some additional information here. Census records, obviously every 10 years, good source of information, lists the household, parents' names, their place of birth, whether they were able to read or write, whether they were able to speak English or not, if they had attended school, if they are attending school, etc. And it'll list all of the household members in the family at the time. So if we open this up, so you see all of the family members that were living with the household in 1920 with Joseph and Agnes, and we'll cover who all these people were here in just a minute. But you can see John right here, the son. He was 17 years old, still residing at home, and this they give the house number and the dwelling on the census record, and It would have been really helpful, obviously, if they would have given the street name and the address. I'm not really sure why they decided this name numbering convention. I'm sure that somebody could educate me on that. There's got to be a method for the madness there. But some good information here. So you see the birthplace, the father being Michigan, tongue of the father, American, if it's left blank, and birthplace of mother. So Agnes was born in Poland, and she speaks Polish, and also the Joseph was listed as speaking Polish. So interesting information there. Sorry, I had some kids walking in and out. And occupation, you see Joseph was listed as a farmer, and it looks like John was probably just helping on the farm at the time. So yeah, some good information there. So let's go back, and we'll talk through John's history a little bit in a little more detail. So we covered off on the siblings, and we covered off on John's wives. We can see some of his information here, where he lived and whatnot. 1920, he was married in 1925 to Sarah Peplinski, and you can see that we've got his marriage certificate here. And it was really not a certificate per se, it was more just a record that was filed with the county. And you see, we can drill down real quick on that and just give you an idea of the details that are listed there. So we see the handwritten record here, John and Sarah, incorrectly listed as 19. They were married in 1925, and they were born in 1903, so they should have been listed as 22. So these handwritten records often contain mistakes and some things that conflict with other details, and you just kind of have to piece together multiple sources to derive the exact information of what's true and what's not. So if we scroll up, we would see that this was the city that they were living in, residing in Calcollan, where they were born, that they were farmers. And this is the father's name, Joseph, mother's name, and then mother's maiden name. So you see Agnes Katua confirmed there. They were married September 21st, 1925, in Beaver Township in the Bay County. And you see here the witness, Victor Peplinski, or V, I guess I shouldn't, that's probably Valentine Peplinski, I'm guessing. And Calcollan. And so this would have been the priest that married them here. And then you see Helen Kelpinski, which I believe is Sarah's sister, as the witness listed. Okay. So let's go ahead and go back here. All right, so that covers off kind of on John's side, and so now let's look at his mother and father, and then we can see his siblings and some history on that. So let's pause here, and we'll break up this video segment a little bit, and we'll start with Joseph. All right, let's start off and go through with Joseph now. So we covered off on John, and let's drill down here. So Joseph also born in the Linwood, Calcollan area, and if any of you have information on Joseph's farm, where he lived after he left his parents, that would be great. I don't have that information. It's unclear on whether his son John took over the family farm and he moved on, or if John bought his own place and the place where John was born and Joseph's farm is different. I don't know that information. So if you have that, I'd appreciate it. All right, so Joseph, born in 1872. He passed away in Calcollan in 1939. We can look at his death record. It gets kind of interesting to look at some of the death records, not to be morbid, no pun intended, but to look at some of the causes of death and to see if there were patterns in the death records and the way that our ancestors passed away and whatnot. And also, it's a good source for confirming some of the information and filling in gaps. The death certificate sometimes has links to the parents and other useful information for doing ancestry research. Okay, so let's again kind of start off here. We see our facts along the left-hand side, going all the way down to 1939 at his death, and then you see all the sources. So we got a pretty decent list of sources here, and then all of the family, right? So we left off last time talking about John and his family, and so let's just jump in and talk about Joseph and his. So he was married to Michalina, was her Polish name. Agnes, Americanized, Kotua was her last name. And we're not going to drill down. We could do that in more detail later again on the spouses. Today we're going to talk about the Peplinskis again. But Agnes was married to a gentleman by the name of Stanislaus Jonas. Married in, I believe it was 1890. I'm not going to go through their details, but they were divorced somewhere around 1902, I believe. I'm pretty confident that she was not widowed, that they were divorced, because I found records of Stanislaus living in the downtown Bay City area well into the 1920s. So yeah, they had 5 children together, Michalina and Stanislaus Jonas. So Peter was born in 1891. And many of these Jonases lived in the Bay City area, and I'm confident that their ancestors would still reside there today. So if you see somebody with the last name of Jonas in the Bay City area and you're still around in that area, good possibility that you could be related. So Peter, the oldest, Clements Stanley, born in 1892, and then Anna, Frank, and Mary. And then they were Michalina and Joseph married in 1903, and later that year John Peplinski was born. And then just a heads up here on Edward. He was a little bit tough to do some research on in his early years. One of the early census records had him listed as with the last name of Jonas and being born in 1903, and so I've got to update this information. My information that I've done just in the last couple of days is that Edward actually was a full-blood brother with John, unlike I found in earlier records. I believe that he was born in 1904 and not 1903. Obviously, that would have been very difficult to have 2 children in the same year. Possible, but not likely, being that I think John, if I recall right, was born in May, so that would make it almost impossible for Edward to be born in 1903 as well, and they definitely were not twins. So anyhow, I believe that he was born in 1904, and he was a full brother of John. And again, if somebody has additional information before I find it and repost it to my site, let me know. And then finally, Delphinia Peplinski, she was born in 1906 and passed away in 1986. So some good information there. So I'm going to pause here. Okay, so let's look at some of the maybe interesting pieces here. We're not going to cover off on the siblings of Joseph right now. We're going to cover off on that when we go through Andreas, Andrew, Peter, and Julia Bukowski. So let's look at maybe some of the detailed records here, which could be interesting. So we did look at the 1920 census records previously. We can look at the 1910 census records and see who was living in the house with Joseph. We should see John being about 7 years old at the time, right? So let's see here. So here we see Joseph Peplinski, and we see Aggie, and we see all of the Jonas kids. We see Peter, Clement, Anna. We see Frank and Mary. I guess Frank being a nickname for one of the others, and John. And yep, he's listed as 7, and there's Edward as 6 years old. So that helps confirm, right, that he likely was born in 1904. And then Delphinia was 4 years old at the time. Okay, let's see here if there are any other good tidbits that we might be able to pull out. I think most of this just aligns with and confirms some of the other things that we talked about earlier. We see Joseph, if we scroll across here, and let's look at this. So this is a kind of nice feature with an ancestry. If you click on that little icon that I just clicked on, it breaks it apart so you don't have to read the handwritten stuff. They've done an awesome job at being able to transcribe this information to text, and they do it pretty accurately. Let's see here. So yeah, not too much additional information that we didn't already know. Okay, so let's go back, look at a little bit more information here. Okay, so we can look at their marriage certificate. Let's look at that. So best to look at the handwritten record rather than some of the indexed information they have here. Oh, sorry, for this one it didn't have a link to the image itself. It just has the indexed information. So it's showing as father being Andrew Peplinski, mother being Juliana Peplinski, and spouse Michelena, right? So everything confirmed, and they list the marriage date of 1901 here. Actually, I haven't mentioned it. I thought it was 1903 from memory previously, but 1901. Okay. So let's, because I think there's probably some mystery of my aunts and uncles on maybe some of their aunts and uncles. From my understanding, John Peplinski really didn't have too much interaction with their grandfather or his siblings, which would have been the aunts and uncles of my aunts and uncles. So it might be interesting to take a look at Delphinia and see how her life, what we can gather from hers. So let's drill down on that. So again, she was born in 1906 and passed away in 1986, spent her life in the Bay City area. She was married, I do know that. So let's see here, yeah. So she married a man by the name of Joseph Voisin, hope I pronounced that right, in 1927. I haven't been able to find any children that they had together. So again, if any of you have any information that might be able to add to the story, please pass that along. She was living down in the Detroit area in 1930. Let's see, 1935, let's drill down on that. 1940 census records, let's look at that. Okay, so you see the two of them here, Joseph and Delphinia, and this, yeah, so they were living in the Bay City area, and actually in Essexville in 1940. So they moved back from Detroit. Who knows what brought them to Detroit, and then back again from 1930 to 1940. But you see here they were living there. He was a teleroom cleaner. Interesting. Telephone room, maybe cleaner? And I can't really read that too well. The industry is listed as WPA. I'm not really sure what that is. And this was the occupation code. Not really anything I can. He was making $600 a year in 1940, and no other sources of income. So definitely a hard working class guy, I'm sure. There was a good age difference there. That's kind of interesting, right? So she was 38, or no, 33, and he was 50, so 17 years her senior. All right. So hopefully that was a little bit interesting to some of you. And let's see here real quick before I move on. And to be honest with you, I haven't looked at this in a long time when I pulled this information back. Let's see if we can find a little bit more where she was living at later in life. Passed away there. Okay, so here I mentioned death certificates earlier, just to give you an idea. Let's see if we can view the record on this. Now, oops, my bad. Okay, here we go. All right, so let's go back to Joseph. And if we want to look at Edward, we can do that. So again, Edward Peplinski, not Jonas. And obviously this is not a scripted show, folks. This is just information that I've gathered a long time ago. Okay, so he married Florence McFarland in 1925, so pretty close in time frame to when he married, when John had married. So, and also just a heads up too, and my Aunt Sophie had passed along a picture of their marriage photo, and so I'll get that linked in as well as soon as I can. And Edward stood in the wedding for John, which I guess wasn't too surprising, being that close in age together. So let's actually, let me see if I got that. No. Marriage records. Okay, yeah, so let's take a look at this. Maybe John would appear in here somewhere. Okay. View the record. No, unfortunately there's no image with this one as well, just the indexed information. Okay. Here we go. Actually, here's some information. Let me see. Bertson Thomas Frederick Fritz. See, now this is interesting. So let's drill down on Thomas. See, now this is, again, part of the reason why this has been so confusing for me to track down whether Edward was a full brother or a half sibling of John, right? Because we see him here listed as Jonas in a lot of records, right? But it seems clear that he was born after John was. So I guess a couple of explanations could be, right, that his mother's first husband, right? And maybe they spent some time together, and he kept his name as Jonas, or that Stanislaus Jonas had another wife after, or just a birth out of wedlock, and they couldn't take care of the baby, and they went to, the baby Edward went to live with his mother, or his first wife, and took the name of Jonas. I'm not really sure, so that's a mystery anyway, but you'll see him in many records down the line of having the last name of Jonas instead of Peplinski, even though he was born, it appears, after my grandfather John. So again, if you guys have any information on that and you can share and help me fill in the mystery on that, that would be great. I'll continue to research it as well. Okay. So obviously parts of this are going to be a little bit messy. I'm going to share the information as best as the information that I've got available to me, in hopes that some of you can help fill in, again, some of these gaps and blanks. All right, so I think we covered off on Joseph pretty well. So let's go back there, see if there's anything else that we want to mention. Okay, we covered off on Joseph's wife. We covered off on the children, the Jonases, as well as the two, potentially third, Jonas, Peplinski, and went through a number of his images. And so I think we're ready to talk about his father, where he resided, and then where he came from in Poland, and what his journey and some of the details of his family side. So, all right, until next time.